And welcome back to Capitol Tonight one final time. Well, yesterday, nearly 24 members of the Assembly said goodbye to the chamber for the last time. Some of them lost bids for re-election, and others didn't seek another term. All of them are now moving on to the next chapter of their lives, and that includes my next guest. Michael Benjamin is an assemblyman representing parts of the Bronx. He's often outspoken, and he's joining me tonight to talk about some of his time in office and to share some thoughts on the future of the legislature and maybe New York State as a whole. Thanks very much for your time.
So thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
So you're going out with a bang. You got to stay up until 4 in the morning. That's probably something that you won't miss.
No, I won't miss that. I'm so tired from it. So.
Yeah, I can imagine. Was it a disappointment to you that maybe you're going out with this sort of session that was a little bit on the lackluster side?
A bit of a whimper. Yeah. And then also disappointed in the hydrofracking bill should even have been on the calendar.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually surprised that you're asking the governor to veto it. I have the letter from you in front of me, and obviously we've been speaking about it a lot this evening. I'm curious why you're so vehement about it. You're from the Bronx. I mean, it's not an issue that directly impacts, although the drinking water, arguably, it does. Right,
but the New York City's watershed is already protected. Correct. That's done. But it does impact the Bronx, other parts of our state. It's having cheaper natural gas to keep us all warm and to heat our homes and to fuel our businesses. We need to do the exploration. My issue with the bill is the moratorium is redundant. We already have a moratorium, a de facto moratorium. We didn't fund the 29 inspectors that DEC requested. The D.C. regulations have not come out yet, and they haven't come out in a year and a half. I can't quite see how in the next 5 months a new governor is going to race through regulations and then begin drilling. So it was the wrong thing to do. It made it too contentious, and I was disappointed my conference did not listen to the Western New York representatives who explained why the bill was flawed and why we shouldn't even have it on the floor for a vote. But in our own, I guess, arrogance, knowing better, let's put it out there and let's vote for it. I was disappointed at that and how it turned out.
Were you disappointed in anything else in terms of this, just specifically policy-wise, that did not get addressed in this particular session? I mean, the $315 million, for example, that was not cut from the mid-year budget deficit, and now is Andrew Cuomo's problem. He said that he thought that the legislature failed New Yorkers again. Do you agree with that assessment?
It's cutting another $350 million would have been very difficult in just one night, and not really knowing where the cuts were going to be. I know the governor probably wanted an across-the-board cut. And when you do across-the-board cuts like that, all you're doing is spreading out mediocrity and hurting agencies beyond. I mean, the very fact that former D.C. Commissioner Pete Granis was fired because he had the temerity of actually saying these cuts are going to cripple my agency. You know, cuts ought to be proportional to an agency's abilities. And what Governor Patterson proposed, I thought, would have been crippling. I thought it was right for us not to take it up. It was also important. $350 million is a heck of a lot less than what it was a year ago when it was $1.2 billion that we had to make some painful cuts to. I think incoming Governor Cuomo ought to be able to determine what cuts he wants to make, and he'll work with the legislature to get that done.
There was a photo, actually, that our reporter Caitlin Ross sent us of you right before the vote was taken for Shelley Silver to become the Speaker for another 2 years, and it says, the pin says, "Silver is gold." I mean, obviously you are a Shelley Silver supporter. What do you make of all of these stories about Andrew Cuomo and the tension between the two of them, and this speculation that the governor-elect might prefer it if Silver wasn't around anymore?
That's what Silver versus Cuomo versus Silver. It's more of an institutional thing, the governor versus the legislature.
So that's a traditional thing, and that happens all the time.
It really doesn't matter. It could have been somebody else. You'd have this speculation. There's this false belief that Sheldon Silver is the ironclad boss of the Assembly, Democratic delegation. He's not. He's a consensus builder. He's pragmatic. He gets his members to go along with things that are important to the state. He's like trying to corral cats, which can be difficult sometimes. Members actually are the ones that drive the agenda for the
But it is
different.
Conference. I mean, you were here during the Bragman coup.
No, I was not.
Oh, you were not.
So
right. So it predates you just before you actually got here.
About 2 years or so.
Right. So before he made this change and became more amenable to listening to the desires of the conference, there were some there were some complaints about the Speaker being too much of a dictator.
Right. In my 7.5 years, he hasn't been. I mean, he's had coffee classes with members from across the state, 8 to 10 members. He talked to you about issues, hear from you. He wouldn't even talk to you, hear from you what the issues were, what the concern was. He would have open conferences, people would be able to speak their minds. And I've seen him, I've watched his expressions and try to understand Shelley speak as I watch him in conference. And I could see where, if the conference was going in one direction and he couldn't do anything about it, he had to go on. Congestion pricing was one.
I remember.
I mean, that occurred. The death penalty, when the Court of Appeals invalidated death penalty because of the jury instructions. Even though Shelley had supported it back in '95, he didn't push the conference to reinstitute it. He let the conference members say we were opposed to the death penalty, and we let it die.
Let me, I just want to talk about you and your future. I've heard that you might be running for Congress.
That's my intention.
Okay. Will you run against Jose Serrano? It would be a primary, wouldn't it?
It would be a primary, you know, it's part of democracy.
Okay, but leaving and starting from a platform of private citizen is much more difficult than starting from a platform of elected official. So why did you choose to go that route?
I didn't feel, when I didn't run this year for Congress, I didn't feel comfortable going back to the Assembly and knowing I wanted to be someplace else, and then spending 2 years in the Assembly preparing to run for Congress. You know, and that was the sort of thing that reporters would criticize me for. You know, I'm in the Assembly working on running for another race.
Well, I mean, by contrast, Andrew Cuomo was in the Attorney General's office working on becoming governor. I mean, that's a standard thing that people do.
I tend sometimes not to be standard.
Okay.
It's important, I think, to have some level of being different, of being able to try to have a different sort of standard. I think voters will respect that. Plus, it gives me the opportunity, when I run for Congress, to sort of run as an outsider, one who's been in state government, understands how it operates, saw the good and the bad, and then now can come back again as a private citizen who wants to run for a higher office to try to bring something different to the Congress and work on behalf of my constituents.
But doesn't it make fundraising difficult? I mean, and also, particularly running against a name like Jose Serrano, who's been around for quite a long time, would be also difficult.
Now, running for the office and what the office can do for the Bronx, for however the Bronx districts are configured, it's about the issues, and I think voters are ready to talk about issues. It's not about personalities anymore. It ought not to be about personalities. And I believe that I have a sufficient record in the Assembly, which makes me viable and sellable to constituents and to those who would contribute to my campaign, and the issues that I would raise in my campaign for Congress.
So when will you be starting that exactly?
I've sort of begun. I haven't filed the committee yet, but I've begun the process of campaigning for Congress.
And what will you be doing in the meantime, aside from that?
A number of things are in the works, and nothing's been finalized yet, but I'll be comfortable. My family will be taken care of. Okay.
You'll have to come back and talk to us about that. Do you have any final thoughts on Albany and how it's changed in the 7+ years that you've been here?
It's changed. I mean, it's changed to the point where I think the incoming governor recognizes you can't be a steamroller, that you have to have respect for the legislature as a co-equal branch of government. And as I've learned, it's gotten stronger over the years in response to strong governors. And legislature is there, as Shelley always says, it's a people's house. And as your dad has written in his books, the legislature sort of acts as brakes on an executive, and making sure things can slow a little bit to make sure the interests of the people are respected and are taken care of. So I think what people call dysfunction is the actual purpose and function of the legislature, is to sometimes put the brakes on some things that are not good. And I'm happy with the fact that when I was in my 7 years, I was able to help stop some things that I thought were not good policies coming out of the executive branch. I think New York can respect that.
Well, it is going to be not the same without you around, I have to say. We rely on you for information and for commentary, and I hope you keep in touch, Assemblyman Michael Benjamin. It's good to see you.
Thank you.